I am about to sit down with one of the top basketball collectors on the entire planet. His collection will blow you away. He's going to show me a lot of his cool cards that typically never get removed from the vault, stuff that you wouldn't believe. You'll learn a thing or two about collecting vintage autographs and vintage cards, and honestly, just cards in general from watching this. What's up, everyone? Back by popular demand. This is Sports Card Madness, but this is another episode of Madness Museum. The first one was a huge hit. I brought a good buddy of mine on. I personally think he has the best private basketball card collection in the country. I'm in awe. He's helped me with my sets, and he's got some bonkers stuff he's going to show today. So I brought on Bryan Oakley. He's known as Historic Hoopla on both eBay and Instagram. I consider him not only a basketball card vintage collector, but also a historian. You know, he really cares about the game and the history of the game. And that's why I like Bryan so much, because every time he posts something about a card, I feel like I get a lesson behind the card, which is pretty dope. So welcome, Bryan. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I don't know if I deserved all that praise, but I'm following Dan. I saw your interview with Dan, and yeah, that collection is extra impressive. But
we're going to see some crazy hoop stuff. So the format for the audience, we're going to keep it punchy. I'm going to ask Bryan for each thing that he shows us. I'm going to ask him why he wanted this in his collection, how he got it, and then how much it would auction for at like I don't know, we'll call it a drunk charity auction or something like that. And whether that's an individual card or the set, you know, I'll let him decide. So Bryan, what do we got, man? What are we starting with? What are we showing everybody here?
I'll start with a really, I think, significant card that I acquired at last year's National. So at quick glance, it just looks like a pretty ordinary autographed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar rookie card. But if you look close, it's not signed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it's signed Lou Alcindor. This is a really significant and unique signed rookie card. There are two well-known documented copies of this card. If you actually go to the PSA website and like look for Lou Alcindor signatures, this is the first exemplar that comes on the site. So yeah, there's two known copies of it. This is the highest graded of the two. It's PSA 5. And Kareem just doesn't sign this way anymore. He had about a 1.5-year window between when this card first came out and when he did the name change, where he could have signed this way. But many people know that by the time Lou Alcindor turned pro, he hated signing autographs. So while there's a lot of UCLA Lou Alcindor autographs out there, there's very few copies.
Amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. He had only, a year and a half to sign the card. That was it.
Right. So what's most significant about this to me, really the reason that I had to acquire it is that I'm a set builder. I'm an autograph set builder, Nick, as you know. And so I have 100% complete 1969 Topps autograph set.
So just pausing for a second for the people watching, he very casually and passively said, oh, you know, I got this card because it's like important for this set I got. The set that Bryan has, this isn't like some modern autograph set. He has that tall boy set, 1969, fully autographed, all 99 cards, including the checklist. There's only a few of those in the world. I personally am working on one. I'm about 3 away. It is tough. He pulled it off, and he definitely has the best one. So that's amazing. Kudos to you. So now I know why you'd want a Lou Alcindor card. Now it's like a real set. You know what I mean?
Right. I didn't really feel like the set. I knew where this card was, and once I saw it, I just was like, okay, my set's not a real complete set if I don't have this card. I just felt like I had to have it. You know, I have one signed Kareem too in a PSA 6 with an auto 10. But that's nothing compared to this one. This is the one.
Amazing.
The other thing that really inspired me is seeing about a year ago, PWCC had just a ton of PSA 10s, like unsigned 1969 Topps PSA 10s, and all the registry guys went crazy. And there was all these like top one PSA 10s that went off for like 50 to 80,000, and these are like common players, like obscure guys. and they were going for 50 to 80,000. And I just thought to myself, like, as significant as those are to like registry sets, like none of them are more significant than this copy.
I'm with you on
Like, I
that.
just feel like this is the most significant 69 top. Now, I think the Llewellyn Cinder PSA 10 is a top 3 maybe, and those go for several $100,000. I just felt like long term, this is just a significant investment, and I feel like it's worth more in my set than it's worth on its own, if that
Right.
makes sense.
I talk
Yeah.
about this all the time with LZ. You know, we look at like maybe not a PSA 10 because that's a special example, but we'll take a PSA 9 autographed vintage card, right? And sorry, a PSA 9 non-autographed vintage card, and then we'll take a PSA 5 that's autographed. If it's a deceased player, I feel like the values will merge over time.
Right.
The 10's kind of special territory, especially for that set, but I agree
Yep.
with you.
For
Very
sure.
interesting.
Yeah,
Cool.
right. I mean, when you compare the PSA 10s to some of these rare autos and the PSA 9s and stuff, I mean, it's just interesting. You're going to be able to put together a lot more PSA 9 sets than you can put together autograph sets. The
Right.
scarcity of the autographs are
Of
just
course.
so significant, you
That's
know?
why I'm into it. All right. So did you want to show off another card from that set as well?
Yeah, sure. So this is probably tied for my favorite card. He's somewhat of an obscure Hall of Famer. This is 1969 Topps Gus Johnson, and this is also the highest rated. It's a PSA 6. So this card is sought after for two different types of registry set collectors. One is the signed Hall of Fame rookie autograph set collectors, and the other is, of course, the 69 Topps set collectors, autos, of course. So there's sort of two groups that would target this card. Gus is a Hall of Famer. He passed away in 1987, sadly, of brain cancer. So he was the first person from the 1969 Topps set to pass away. So for that reason, it's just an incredibly scarce card. And I'm not a big fan of autograph grades. You'll notice that I don't have an autograph grade on this card because I don't care what anybody says about this autograph. It's a 10. It's got some skips. It's got some streaks. Not perfect in a technical sense, but God, it looks, I mean, I just love the way this autograph looks. It's also something you'll notice. It's one of the few cards that I'll show you today. In fact, it's the only card that I'll show you today that's signed in permanent marker and Sharpie. Something else I love about this card is the black Sharpie after time can start to turn a little bit purple and it shows its age. And some people find that to be a turnoff, but I find it to be just beautiful because it shows the age of the signature. You know,
It's much better than mine. I have a trimmed Gus
right.
Johnson signed in ballpoint in a very sloppy way, but I'll take it.
Any 69 Topps Gus Johnson autograph, I don't care what it is a amazing card that a lot of people would go after.
All right, so you've got this 1969 set. I'm aspiring to get it. If the hogs went wild at, you know, a Sotheby's or a Christie's or a Heritage Auction, you know, the 69 set, especially yours because it's the highest graded, what do you think could happen? What do you think it could hit?
You know, I haven't thought about that in a while. But just off the top of my head, I would estimate probably $250,000. I think
Right.
on this particular set, you would have to pay a premium for getting it all together because it's such a difficult assembly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally agree. It's such a scarce asset. I talk about scarce assets all the time with the audience. You know, I don't really like art, thankfully. I love
Yeah.
cards. And so this is, you know, these 69 sets, I can't imagine more. I talk about this with 86. More 86 Fleer sets can be put together, maybe 50 or
Yeah.
30 or something like that. This 69 set that he has, only 10, maybe a dozen can possibly exist like on planet Earth. And you know, how many Picassos, how many Mona Lisas are out there? So it's a great asset. I think you're undervaluing it. I think it's probably more like 300 or a little higher, but who knows, right? It's all funny money.
Right.
All right, what do we got
Yeah.
next, Bryan?
So next I'll go into 61 Fleer, which is another set that I'm working on. This one is not complete. I'm at 65 of 66 in this set. And this is probably my favorite card in the set. It's another Hall of Fame rookie card. This is also the highest graded. It's Hal Greer. Nobody likes the qualifier, but this is a scarce enough card where when you get the highest graded card, even with the qualifier, it's just insane. So Hal Greer didn't sign many of these. It's like the Gus Johnson. There's two groups going after this. You've got the Hall of Fame signed rookie set collectors, and then you've got the 61 Fleer set collectors. So it's a PSA 8 with the OC qualifier. In retrospect, I wish that I got the auto graded because I actually think, even though it's ballpoint, that it might qualify for an auto 10. But I'm unlikely to send it back in because I don't want them to reevaluate it. I like the grade. So I think I'll just leave it where it's at.
That's actually a good tip for the audience in case we have any like noobs listening. You can't tell PSA like, give me an off-center, designation when you send it in. It's up to them. It's not up to you.
Right.
I've tried this many times, and they say, sorry, we're pausing the order until you say it's okay. So there's no guarantee. If Bryan sends this 8 off-center in, they may ding it 3 or 4 grades. They may not. He doesn't know, and it's not really worth the risk, And
there's no real rhyme or reason at this point. You used to be able to request a qualifier. It didn't mean you would get one, but you could ask, and they would take it. Like, it'd be like, would you rather have an 8 OC or a 6, right? And nowadays they don't accept those requests anymore, and they're very inconsistent about giving qualifiers, not giving. It's wild. I got a submission back recently on some star cards, and it was a complete team signed set, and it was Blazers because I'm a Portland guy. And like almost every card got an OC, and they weren't even like significantly OC. It was really, really strange. Really strange.
Yeah. I've had a card with a mark go from a 6 to a 2, baby.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So be careful if you're sending in cards with just be careful all around, and don't overpay cards with qualifiers. I'm not talking about Hal Greer 1961 here, but like if you're going after vintage stuff with qualifiers on it, just kind of do the mental math with it. Pay like a few grades lower, It's good advice.
People don't know about Hal Greer, that he's still the #1 all-time scorer in Philadelphia 76ers history.
That's wild. That's
wild.
This
is the other thing that's interesting about Hal Greer is his free throw was a jump shot. He actually jumped when he shot free throws. And this card is actually a Syracuse Nationals card, but Syracuse Nationals became the Philadelphia 76ers.
So we'll see. I guess it must be Embiid that's going to pass him, probably, right? If he stays with Philly.
I would expect that if he sticks around.
All right. What else we got from 1961?
Okay, this one is an interesting card. There are three of these, 3 known copies authenticated by PSA, and 2 of them are signed on the back. And this is one of the ones that are signed on the back. This is probably the worst 61 Fleer Wilt Chamberlain in action. The other one that's signed on the back is better than this, and the other one is a terrible miscut, but it's signed on the front in Sharpie.
I think the other one says Happy New Year or something on it.
It
right?
does. It's got a date. It's a great copy. It just sold for $17,000 privately.
Okay. Cool.
So, but this is one of these ones where beggars can't be choosers. I needed this card for my set. I was perfectly content to get a back signed copy because the other ones just weren't in my price range, or I didn't have access to them or whatever. So, you take what you can get. Now I have the entire in action signed set. I wouldn't have that if it wasn't for this card. And this is a version of Wilt Chamberlain's rookie card. I mentioned before that I'm working on the 61 Fleer set. I have the entire signed set with the exception of the Wilt base rookie. That is the one card that I'm missing from this set.
That is a beast, right? That just sold. What did that sell? Was it Heritage? I can't remember, but it was like 200.
Yeah, a couple $100,000. But yeah, so I don't remember exactly. Around $250,000. It kind of depressed me. I've had a chance. I've had a chance at 2 of them. That card has haunted me because there was a raw one on eBay some years back, and I kept looking at it, and the seller had no feedback, and I was like, it looks good, but like it was just too dicey. It was raw. They wanted $20,000 for it, and inevitably somebody made an offer after it sat there for like 3 months. Somebody made an offer, and as soon as they made that offer, I was like, oh. Like somebody did their research and was smarter than me and snagged it. I was like, well, at least I'll never have to see it again. And then like a year later, it showed up on Heritage. and did like 130, 140,000.
And
And
then
I think
now
it
it's
ended
done
up selling
too.
for like 12 or 13,000 raw, and it torments me to this day. It just
So yeah, I mean, for the audience, if you're watching, I mean, some of this vintage hoop stuff is bananas. Like, so this obviously is a very important card for basketball history. It's Wilt Chamberlain's,
right,
both of these cards, but that base card in particular, there's
base
a
card.
reason it's worth $200,000. It's for, I mean, I think personally the two hardest vintage autographs for basketball are, other than like the really obscure guys, like the Hall of Famers that you know about, are like Pistol Pete and Wilt. And it was just like a perfect timing of circumstances. Pistol Pete only lived to be about 40. Wilt just didn't sign his stuff, and they didn't want stuff signed back then.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're two grails to go after. It's crazy. I hope you get it, man. So what do you?
Yeah. I got a lead on one. I mean, yeah, with the Wilt, it was. I mean, Wilt was doing shows, but he was signing 8x10s in Sports Illustrated.
Yeah,
People
no one
didn't want
wanted.
to get his card signed back then because his 61 Fleer was a valuable card, and at the time, it was considered to be, defacing the card. It ruined the value, which was lunacy. And luckily we've decided, there's better ways to do things, but it makes these valuable vintage signed rookie cards very rare.
I've tried to timestamp the year that our thinking changed. I think I texted you this. So I have programs from the 90s for the National Card Show. And in about 1992, 93, there was an article that finally talked about the shift away from the thinking that it devalued the rookie cards. So if you
Right.
think about that, it's like all the way up to the early 90s. It was
Yep.
bad to sign rookie cards. So
Oh,
if players
100%.
if players passed away before the 90s, their stuff is rare because they just, like you said, photos, magazines, shoes, that type of stuff that was getting signed. So it's crazy.
Right.
So what do you think? The 61 set is really heavily weighted towards the Wilt. Obviously, the base Wilt
Yep.
is like the 800-pound gorilla of the set. What do you think that set fully slabbed would go for at a drunk charity auction?
I mean, with the Wilt, if you had like an average Wilt in there, I mean, it could go 500,000, I would say, for like a relatively high grade set. I mean, this, and maybe your audience does, and maybe they don't. That like we're a lot more tolerant with grades for signed cards than we are for unsigned cards, because get a card signed, it's being handled. You run the risk of it not passing authentication. People back in the day just weren't getting high grade cards signed.
And when it comes to the sets, it does start to matter. You want consistency. Like the 86 Fleer, I wanted to make sure it was all PSA new label, right? Like you're building all over a certain grade. Like you don't, if for the audience, it doesn't have to be a high, it could be a 90s skybox set, although that's got a tough Jordan in it. If you're building any autograph set, just think about like, consistency. Don't have a hodgepodge of like this slab and that slab and this grade. Like have an idea, because if you do go to sell it as a whole piece of art at an auction, it's just going to look better and present better with consistency. And that's what Bryan has, which is awesome.
Yeah, one of the other real serious 61 Fleer set guys, like somebody I'm real close with and talk to a lot. Like his set is he wants all vintage ballpoint. I'm like, give me the highest grade. Like I prefer not personalized, although I think that we frown way too much on personalized signatures. It's not that big of a deal if there's personalization there.
Yep.
But I prefer not personalized if I can get it. But I'm sort of targeting centering and grade. But he's like, I want all vintage ballpoint. Give me the most beat up card in the world. And I want vintage ballpoint.
Yeah, that was another tip you mentioned in there. The audience, if you see cards like you'll see sometimes to Dan, but it's like erasered out. Be careful with that, because if things are personalized, they're worth less. Personally, I like it when it says to Nick on it, because that's
right.
cool. It's my name, right? So I don't
I
mind
know
that
a
at all.
couple, right, and I know a couple of very high end vintage collectors that prefer personalized. They don't care if it's their name. They want personalized. I can think of 3 high-end vintage collectors that have insane and valuable collections, and they think that the personalization, first of all, it's more ink. They think it's less likely to be forged that way, and they just think that it carries more of a story.
Yeah.
So I think I'm not a fan of It's not my first choice, but I do think that we need to change the narrative around it a little bit, especially with some of these rare early signatures. I have a lot of personalized autographs in my collection, not as much in my autograph sets, but in my signed photos and we need to change the narrative a little bit. It's not that big a deal if your vintage auto is personalized.
Man, if the if the audience came here for vintage basketball knowledge and vintage auto knowledge, they've come to the right place. Oh, between the two of us, we could geek out on this forever. What is so next up, you're showing me 1957, right? That's the
Yeah, 57. I've got a longer way to go on this set. I'm at 73 of 80. So these are my three primary sets: 69, 61, and 57. So 57 tops.
What's special about 57? Whose rookie year is that? You know, what's special about that set?
So it's Bill Russell's rookie year and it's Bob Cousy's rookie year. And I have a beautiful Bill Russell auto. I have basically a perfectly centered Bob Cousy with it's got a little snow, so it was graded a 5 with a 10 auto. But I won't show you either of those cards today because they're not my favorite cards from the set.
Right.
The holy grail in that set is Maurice Stokes, because he had literally less than a 1-year window to sign that card. I mean, it was just a couple months. There is one out there. The PSA Pop report will show Pop 0, but there is one that has a PSA letter. So it's not in a slab. Card is still raw, but it has a PSA letter.
So I mean, that's another lesson for the audience. Don't always believe the Pop report because things could be old versions of slabs or have letters. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I'll show you an example of that actually from the 57 set here. Neil Johnston is another Hall of Fame rookie card that's impossible in that set. I have one that's signed on the back. I mean, I would, but my favorites are going to be, this is one of them, Earl Lloyd. Earl Lloyd is the first African-American to play an NBA basketball game. This is the highest graded. It's actually tied for the highest graded. And then I actually just happen to have both of the highest graded.
It just multiplied.
Yeah, this one actually is available. If anybody this one. So I prefer this copy because it's I like the ballpoint and it's got better centering. But the auto would never grade a 10. This one, on the other hand, centering's not as good, but it's got the Hall of Fame inscription.
Oh, that's a 610.
So technically, this is the highest rated, and this is the one that I'm actually open to selling. But
all right, there you go. If you guys want that.
Hey, I'm also open to keeping them. I like owning them, but if somebody came to me with the right offer, Earl Lloyd stuff has gone crazy. Just recently, a Type 1 photo. It was just a generic Type 1 photo. I think it did $7,000 via auction. Not a rookie Type 1. It wasn't from a championship game. It's just a generic action shot. And I think it did $7,000 recently. So Earl Lloyd stuff is just red hot. I mean,
so how did you get these cards, Bryan? I forgot to ask on the other set. Are you getting most of these in auction, private sales, finding them from old time guys and getting them slabbed?
So I do a lot of networking. This one in particular, I actually bought both of these cards raw. Somebody brought this to me and showed it to me. Actually, Jim Doyle, who maybe some people know, brought this to me and showed it to me. I didn't think it would get a 6. I was thrilled that it got a 6. I thought it had the eye appeal of an 8, but I thought technically it wouldn't land that high. So I got really lucky on this one. In hindsight, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, that's a 6. But at the time I was thinking a 4 or 5. This one I also bought raw from another collector. I definitely overpaid for it at the time. I was really confident it would grade out. This was the real big risk with the Gus Johnson for me. I bought this raw. I spent $3,000 on it at the time. Anybody would have thought I was nuts to spend $3,000 on this, but I knew I was going for the set. I was in the set a little bit earlier than a lot of other people that are doing it now, so we hadn't seen as much of a boom. But it was raw, and I thought it was good. I felt strong about it. I got it from a credible collector, but there was always some risk there. I think this card probably today, if it went auction, it'd probably do 15 to 20,000.
Okay, so, I didn't realize it was that high. That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's the highest graded, and it's just the signature is it's so beautiful. This one I bought already slabbed. This one I bought in a Beckett holder and then crossed it over into the AOC. The Alcindor I bought already slabbed. It was already a PSA 5.
So for the audience, I do want to say Bryan is maybe tied with me. I don't know. You're probably better than me. Bryan is probably the best networker. He's almost like a mentor to me in the hobby. Like the way he has networked, he also has expertise in this area. So people come to him and say, hey, is this good? Is this not good? and then Bryan has the opportunity to buy it, which is great. And he has turned more raw cards with signatures into slabbed cards and created more value for himself that way. So it's a good lesson that, like, if you're like, oh my God, these prices are so scary, well, network, make friends, go to flea markets, go to nonprofit auctions. You might find something that people just, they're willing to give you at a decent price. They're too busy or whatever, and you can turn it into something that's worth $10,000 or $15,000. So don't be scared by this and feel like you got to go to auction for all these things. Like, there's always a way,
Right, right. I couldn't agree more.
Cool. Did you have another 57 you wanted to show?
Yeah, this will be the last card I show you. This is tied with the Gus Johnson for my very favorite card.
Whoa, wow. That's a bold
this
statement.
one I just got this from a Leland's auction. And this is another one of the early African American pioneers. This is Nat Sweetwater Clifton. This is a pop one, but it was very similar to what you mentioned just a bit ago. It's a pop one, but there is one other copy out there that's in a blue label PSA holder, and that doesn't show on the pop report. So we know of at least two. The thing about this card, it's only graded a 2, but Clifton signed right on the sweet spot in beautiful vintage ballpoint. And this is the first card in the set, and it is almost always off center or miscut. And it's just insane that this is dead center, right?
It's a really good 2. It's a very well centered 2.
Yeah, I would take a center 2 over a miscut or off center 5 or 6 any day on this particular.
Unless there's a stain, I feel like that's undergraded. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's the eye appeal on this is just insane. And Nat Sweetwater Clifton, so for those who don't know, super iconic athlete. There was just a movie made about his life. He played for the New York Rens, an African-American team that's in the Hall of Fame, as well as the Harlem Globetrotters before making it to the NBA. Although he wasn't the first black player to play in an NBA game, he was the first black player to sign an NBA contract. And a lot of the NBA integration movement was centered around trying to get Nat Sweetwater Clifton into the NBA. He also was a Negro League baseball player. And I mean, he's even in like the American Softball Hall of Fame. Like, he was a multi-sport athlete. Incredible player. He went to the NBA Finals a ton of times with the New York Knicks, although he never got over the hump. And his mainstream NBA rookie card wasn't until his very final season in the NBA, where after he got traded to the Detroit Pistons. So it's a real shame that this isn't a Knicks card, but he's my number one player that I collect. I collect his Type 1 photos. I collect his autographs. I collect all sorts of stuff. So awesome. It's on record. You can know what I paid for it. So I know you're going to ask the question of what it's worth. I think I paid somewhere between 19 and it was below 20, but a little bit above 19,000 for this card. I didn't expect it to go so high. In fact, I wasn't even going to bid that high on it, but a friend of mine urged me. He said, "That's your guy, man. You got to get that card." And I have no regrets.
Love it.
This is an incredible card.
Do any full 1957 signed sets slabbed exist?
Slabbed, no. But the individual that has the Maurice Stokes, who's quite a good friend of mine, sort of flies under the radar, not super front and center with his collection. He has a complete 57 set that is a combination of PSA, JSA, RAW. He feels like he can do his own authentication and isn't all that concerned with
as it is with many old time collectors. Right. They feel like they know, and sometimes they do know better. Most of the time. What do we think? That 57 set all slabbed, would go for at auction. That would be nuts.
I mean, it's not something I've given a lot of thought to in terms of the value.
It depends on the Russell a lot, obviously.
It does. I mean, yeah, because the Russell can be a $10,000 card or it can be a $150,000 card.
Yeah, depending on the grade or whatever. But I mean, it's kind of feel like
you throw Dan's copy in that you just showed in your previous episode, and I mean that changes everything, right? But the Maurice Stokes, I think, is a 6-figure card, and we know of only one copy, so there's just so many variables at play.
All these sets are a few $100,000, and the 61's probably more like 5 because of the wilt. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a good lesson too, like I don't want to crap on modern cards too much, because if you like Jason Tatum, who's in the finals, by the way,
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
you know,
Congrats.
the only way to collect Jason Tatum stuff, you're not getting a 1961 Jason Tatum, right? You got to get like
Right.
Prism. So
Yep.
there's, all these variations and all this stuff, but the stuff that we're talking about here has held value for 40 years and will likely hold value for longer. Um, so I actually wanted to ask you this, kind of like a surprise question or whatever, but if you were a vintage basketball collector starting today, let's say you had, I don't know, 20 grand, you were going to kind of just throw into just some vintage stuff. Could be signed, unsigned. What years do you think you'd hit, or what do you think you'd go after?
I tell you, first of all, I'll tell you that I think vintage signed programs are extremely undervalued, and I think that the acquisition of JSA um, recently by CGC, I think is going to change the game there, because you're going to be able to start getting these autograph programs slabbed up, right,
Yeah. Yep.
and graded. And I think there's going to become more awareness of like the significance of individual games and programs. So I would maybe say actually that is sort of a sweet spot that's really undervalued right now. I shouldn't say that because it's going to create competition, because I like that space. But
I've
you
been cutting
know,
up programs and putting them on cards as arts and crafts
yeah,
projects. I should
right.
probably be keeping them on the programs.
At least be cautious about it. So I think that that's an area that is. I mean, I think you can't go wrong with the vintage signed cards. I mean, I'm hugely passionate about Type 1 photos. I really love them. Just to be clear, I love modern NBA basketball,
Yeah.
and I think the players that are playing today are greater than any other point of history. But I just think I love just the infancy. Like, I love collecting early basketball stuff. I
Yeah,
love
it's history.
honoring the history of it, and I just think it's so much purer than all this like shiny stuff with these like crap initials. And it's just, the signatures are art. The stuff wasn't made to be valuable; it became valuable. And it's like, this is like the rookie card of the NBA, right? Like, we want the earliest Michael Jordan piece we can have. Well, if you love NBA history, you should want the early stuff, because that's like,
Man, that was deep. It wasn't made to be valuable. It just became valuable. That's
right,
good, man. It's like I always say, the manufactured scarcity versus actual scarcity. That's even one
right,
level higher, right? It just became valuable. People wanted
right.
it. You didn't like make them want it by cutting out logos and putting it on a card. Oh, that's great, man. Um,
Yeah.
wow.
Well, in the
So, of
NBA in the 1950s, I mean, it wasn't even popular. There was hardly any demand, so that adds to the scarcity as well. You
course,
know?
the
Yeah.
cards, packs, everything. Dude, this was something. I told the audience to expect a history lesson too. We sort of got one. This is great. So, Bryan, I wanted to give you a chance to let them know. I know you have an eBay store. I know there's particular cards that you're looking for. I imagine you'd like to, if somebody's just interested in learning or might have something that you want, they can get in touch with you. So, what's the best way to find you, and what are you after?
Yeah. Find me on Instagram at Historic Hoopla. You can always send me a message. I'm happy to chat. I love to network and talk to other people.
What are you looking to get? Like, what's
What
a
am I
card?
looking to get?
What are some cards you want to put out there into the world in case people have them that you'll make a Godfather offer for?
Yeah, here we go. 57 tops, Maurice Stokes. No
All
big
right,
deal.
57
61,
tops of Maurice Stokes.
61 Fleer, Wilt Chamberlain base card.
Another no
No
big
big
deal,
deal.
couple hundred thousand
Yeah.
dollar card. Okay,
These are all obviously signed copies.
yeah,
Uh, in a more likely scenario, I'm always looking at high grade. Well, any deceased player from the 69 top set, if you have it, let me look at it. I probably pay top dollar for stuff if it's what I like, if it's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for like a really nice 69 top Johnny Egan, like, for example. I mean, it's typically maybe a $50 to $150 card on average. If I found the right one, I'd pay top dollar for it. He's only been deceased for a little bit of time.
Johnny Egan,
Johnny
1969.
Egan, I
Got
mean, that's just like an example of like how you might be surprised what I'm looking for. I, you know, I'm a Trailblazers fan, and I've always liked, like fan favorite 6-man types more than the superstars. One of the things I love about set collecting, because I get to go after the like role player guys, the obscure names. So you just be real shocked at some of the stuff that I might be interested in if I can get a look at it. So really anything from those sets, those 3 sets that I mentioned, you know, anything that's signed from those sets, hey, show it to me. You know,
all right,
you might be surprised. I might pay you top dollar for it.
all right, you heard it. So if you have some of that stuff, hit Bryan up. He probably will be the high bidder or the high payer for your card.
Right.
I know I've found him some stuff too, and he's found me some stuff, so it's been great. I'll leave his information. I'll leave his eBay store link in the description and his Instagram as well. Bryan, thank you for showing us like a gajillion dollars worth of cool cards. My personal favorite out of everything I saw today was the Luau Cinder. I think that's sick. You know, when you're talking about something there's only 2 in the world of, there might be another one out there in an attic somewhere, maybe 2.
I suspect there is, yeah.
But finding that, you know, that's the thing that keeps me up at night, man, is like, you know, there's stuff in attics somewhere that's probably just like getting chucked, you know, and that
100%.
scares the crap out of me. It's like, oh man. So
that's what this was. This was sitting in an attic somewhere, and it finally, you know.
Everybody out there, at you know, the old people in your town, hit them up. Anybody that likes basketball, you never know, they might have something really cool. So, Bryan, thanks again, man. This was fun. The 2nd episode of Madness Museum. Appreciate your time, buddy.
You got it. Thanks, Nick. Have a good one.